want to welcome all y'all to Fan of a Fan, and this is strictly only for the fans.
Welcome to Breaktime on Westside, your number one breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. Now, I would like to get into all the, now the man on the mic, blah, 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 but this is part 2. Part 1 was already there, and this is the part 2. This is the continuation. So, before you listen to this, you should probably go and listen to part 1. Probably a very interesting discussion that came in through there. But this is part 2, and we are continuing from here on out, from where we left off in part 1. So, we get to go back to the conversation in 3, 2, 1. When, it comes to things like relationships. And I'll get to that in a little bit. I'm not somebody who subscribes to the blue pill, because I like to be logical. I like to take things as
rational.
Yeah, I like to be rational, which is why I probably won't sit down and just say, oh, you know what, the man should handle all the bills, blah, 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 which is still debatable on certain different levels. But at the same time, I'm not going to base my everything on a relationship or on some form of bliss, because I accept that there is going to be reality after all of that bliss. The only way that you can really experience true pleasure and happiness is if you've had like a certain low point. Like, that's why life is interesting. And that's why I find it hard to subscribe to something like the blue pill. Black pill, since I consider that for incels alone, I can understand where they're at. I can understand why they'd get there. And it's born out of a certain frustration to not get women. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people do end up staying there. But I think for the most part, most guys should move away from there and get to a point of contentment once they understand where the problem is. So, like, my issue with the red pill mainly, because I'm somebody who actually likes a lot of the talk that a lot of people who claim to be so-called red pill that sort of fall under the red pill do talk about, because ideally the best thing that I think a lot of guys should get right now, and it pushes a lot of guys to be more masculine and not just give it up. Because I think the problem with a lot of guys today is that they don't know their worth, and they either overestimate themselves or underestimate themselves. And the red pill sort of teaches you to give yourself value, in that you don't necessarily get to overestimate yourself. And if anything, you could probably underestimate yourself, but by a little bit. Okay? My issue comes in now when this underestimation or estimation or creation of value comes in, and it's like the idea of forming good, healthy relationships kind of takes a sidebar out of all of it, or it becomes like an afterthought. Because I think a lot of red pill guys, a lot of MGTOW guys don't get into relationships, and a lot of these guys are fairly young, and I'm personally against that. Because I feel like while you're young, get into a bunch of different relationships, learn from them. They don't all have to be good. They don't all have to be bad. They don't have to be toxic. I think having the so-called bad relationship here and there is good for you, because it teaches you a lot about women. It teaches you a lot about handling yourself and emotional control, and what it takes to actually get into a relationship and stay there. Because the funny thing is, if you look at a lot of the divorces that happen, you'll rarely ever hear that people divorced because they weren't in love with each other. You'll rarely ever hear that. Rarely ever.
It would be like an issue of money, like some kind of argument,
Yeah, it's financial. It can be financial. It can be adulterous, infidelity and so on.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I think a lot of people need to learn that relationships do.
Wait, what about the simp Bill Gates? Was it infidelity?
You could call it infidelity, but also at the same time, you could say that in his case, it was a business move. Because from things like divorces, it's fairly easier to liquidate stock and, liquidate assets if you need the money to do something. And I think it works to their advantage if they get to have a divorce and then they get to liquidate a bunch of money so that they can use it. Because people usually think that somebody who's worth $100 billion has $100 billion in the account. So for him, can I call him a simp? Not really.
Not really.
Yeah, plus also, from what I heard, apparently he was inappropriate with some of his employees. So I don't know. He can fall under a bunch of different pools.
Bill Gates toxic, huh? Get him a t-shirt. We should print for him a shirt, man.
Probably. But you want to know the funny thing about all of this? Like, a lot of people like to talk about how they want a good girlfriend, but for the most part, like, some of the best, most interesting relationships are the ones who are just a little bit toxic. Like, we like that little bit of toxicity because for some reason, like, they're wildly interesting. Funny enough.
Yeah, man. So long as y'all are not whooping each other's ass, then it's all good.
Actually, funny enough, when you look at a lot of toxic relationships, part of the reason why people stay there is because, like, it has very extreme ups and downs. So it's like with a normal relationship, there's the bumps in the relationships, and then there's like the hills of it. So it's like small valley, small hill, or like maybe a pothole and a bump. It's nothing too deep and it's nothing too high, but it's very worthwhile and it keeps you in check over a certain period. But with like a toxic relationship, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. So you find that when somebody is fighting with his babe and they're fighting with each other, the babe is hitting him, they're trying to hold each other and it's like, no, I don't want you, blah blah blah, you're absolute shit. And it's like people are pretty much getting physical with each other. It'll look bad, but give it like maybe the night and then the following morning they're all pissed off at each other, but they end up having, say, makeup sex, or they try talking shit out and they end up having makeup sex. And that shit is wild. Like, she'll pull some crazy shit and all of a sudden after this wild experience they're like, oh my goodness, man, I love him, I love her.
It's like you went through like 7 gym sessions in one, bro. You're sweating like crazy, you're sore as hell, man.
Yeah, to a certain degree it is kind of like that. So
I mean, you just use some dick pills, man, and everything's fine.
I think that's the one pill that I don't entirely subscribe to. I think if you can use them and you want to use them for, performance related reasons, I think that you should first consider other options before resorting to them. Because, I don't know, like, I made fun of Lamar Odom the other day on an episode about him, I think it was ODing on like dick pills. And like, I wouldn't want to make fun of more people because of that. Because it's like, you need...
No, man, guys, it just gives you an edge. Don't worry about it. It's just that when you're done...
Besides the point. My issue with dick pills is a lot of people are misusing them now because it just sounds cool to try out weird shit. So, like, take for example, over this past year, actually, all through 2021, I think we've had more dick pill, near death, and death related cases in this country than ever. Like, we've had a bunch of different stories, especially around between, I think, Feb to May. We've had a bunch of different stories of people who had heart attacks or died or almost died.
Nah, man, that's just as a result of not following instructions, man.
Bruh,
if you're told to take one.
Bruh, some people can't handle that one. Some people don't have a strong heart to take that one.
Then split the pill in half and eat it.
Bruh, this isn't Molly. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. Because like, if you
I know it increases your heart rate, man.
Yeah, it can increase your heart rate and it can actually mess you up really badly. But actually, back to the pills, back to the main pill story.
Yeah.
I have a problem with red pill in that it's made a lot of young people anti-relationship because it's made them not take a chance on women.
Yeah. Okay, what guys don't understand about it is that it's not supposed to make you like anti-relationship. It's just supposed to make you, like aware of what women are really going for when they get into those relationships. It's usually looks, money, status, right? And also, you just put on top like that masculine, frame that you carry yourself with.
But here's my issue. My issue with it. When you look at a lot of the red pill teachings, if you implement them from at least the ones that talk about, like, make sure you work on yourself, don't necessarily chase babes and shit. Like, if you look at somebody who's taking such advice when they're in their teens, when they're in their early 20s, then it can rob them off of very, very important relationship experiences as they grow up. So at the end of the day, you can find a guy who's made it at 30, but they're not good at being a good boyfriend. Like, they don't know how to be a good partner. Like, that's where my issue comes in. Because think about it like
me.
this. But I haven't named names or anything. But if
Hey
you
man,
but if you want to throw yourself there, then I'm not gonna blame you.
hey
Because
man, I'm telling you, I'm also a bad boyfriend.
I'm not surprised that you'd end up in such a situation. Because here's the thing: if a guy decides to not go out and actually test out the realm of relationships and love and sex,
Yeah.
not necessarily sex. I think that one's a bit more optional than the others.
You don't really have to. I mean,
Well, the organs are yours.
I'm one of the guys who tends to think that people, men, both of us, both men and women, we misuse sex these days, man.
Well, I believe to each his own, and it's your body part.
But yeah, it's entirely up to you, man. If you wanna get it on, raw.
Yeah, so when you look at a lot of younger guys that get into the red pill movement and say that just checking into campus, like when you're in campus, campus is like a free trial to adulting where you get to try out all the
Yeah,
good shit. it's
yeah,
it's pretty much like, well, I'm not gonna call it a premium or luxurious experience into the world that you'll get to live in, but it's somewhere close in that you get all the good things, but it's not super high level. Like, you don't need to be at a super prestigious level, because when you're in uni, like, you can still hit on babes, but having a little bit of money here is actually good for you. But it doesn't mean that she'll just come for you because of the money. Like, you can
yeah,
get them with other things. And I think most people, should be rational enough when they're in
yeah,
campus to at least understand that, what, we're both in university. We don't have to go to a fancy place. As long as there's the feeling and as long as we see something happening, then we can make it happen, and it doesn't have to cost all that much. It doesn't have to come with
yeah,
all of these prerequisites that you probably get once you start working. So
yeah, man.
when
Some chicks they're nice like that.
yeah, a lot of chicks are actually nice like that. But now, once you finish campus, once you get into the real world, once adulting starts hitting you properly, that's when you realize that now you have to create value as a man. You have
Exactly.
to put some money in
But
the bank. You have to build yourself up. Otherwise, if you approach a 10 who's being approached by drug dealers who can splash money, who are being
drug
approached,
dealers,
yeah, who are being approached by drug dealers, who are being approached by businessmen, who are being approached by
yeah,
politicians, judges, and so on. And even just
for high
regular
value men.
guys, yeah, even regular guys that are willing to simp and blow all sorts of cash at them, and you're not making enough, especially with the way a lot of youth are today, then you're kind of left in a very short-handed manner. You go into that and you realize that, you know what, the game is a lot different here. In campus, you could have gotten a babe with a lot less. I'm not
A
saying that
lot
it
less.
makes any less value.
All right. In my experience, with campus, there's some chicks who will be that nice, right? But then there's some chicks who will prefer the dude that's gonna spend all kinds of money on them. I mean,
Facts.
I turned red pill because of such a shorty, man.
Yeah, facts. And I totally get that. Like, obviously, there has to be such people. Like, even in high school, they existed. But
Yeah,
what I'm saying is, when you look at a place like campus, you had a much better free trial to a lot of things. You could test out a lot of stuff for yourself. You could be with the most popular girl, you could be with the least popular girl, you could be with a 10, you could be with a 4. You could
yeah,
go for somebody that will pay the bill for you, and you could go for somebody that you will pay everything for. You could try out a lot. And because of a lot of people subscribing to the red pill movement fairly early on in life, to its full extent, then it kind of robs them of experiencing a lot of that, because you get to learn a lot about a lot of different people and a lot of different babes, which is ideally what I seek to do whenever I'm doing the podcast. I want to at least give a bit of outlook such that the
yeah,
babes know what it's like being a guy, but more so the guys can resonate with what it's like, trying to get babes, being in a relationship, the
yeah.
thoughts of marriage, and so on.
Yeah, and I mean it's good to explore that part before you go red pill. So I think you're doing a pretty good job with the podcast because
Thank you, man.
it's kind of like it goes into the experience, it goes into the details of the experience, even though even though you don't particularly keep it G-rated, but what I can say is you keep it real. So for somebody who's young, it helps go into the details of what it is to be in those relationships, what kind of women you'll encounter. Yeah,
Yeah, man, I like to go raw on that shit. Just
Yee.
saying. But anyways, yeah, that's kind of how I always looked at the red pill. And I think up until the red pill starts incorporating the idea of having good long lasting relationships fairly early on, I don't know if I'm going to be a subscriber to it completely, but I
It's all up to you,
do.
man.
Yeah, but I do see its potential, especially when you are starting out in life. Then I think the red pill movement is great. Like, go
Yeah.
become a red pill person.
When you're like 25.
Yeah. When you're like 25, like when you're trying to build out your life as a guy,
Yeah.
I think red pill content is pretty good. It helps keep you in focus because you can be getting all sorts of pussy in your 20s while you're still not barely doing shit. But when stuff starts to get real, when these babes start to get older and they start thinking of settling down, you won't be the one that they'll choose to settle down with. And the most that
Yeah,
you'll end
man.
up being is a baby daddy. And
Yeah.
to be honest, like, I've seen rich baby daddies and I've seen baby daddies that barely make shit.
They
And
ain't shit.
I feel sorry for baby daddies that can't produce much, like in terms of financial value and other forms of value. Like, I genuinely do feel sorry for how they're spoken about out here. But bottom line is, I like a lot of what they teach in terms of being a better man. But in terms of being a better boyfriend, in terms of being a better husband, I am inclined to thinking that it's not bad, it's just not sufficient.
Yeah. Just go watch Alpha M.
Yeah, he'll help, but Alpha M will help you get babes. Keeping them is a very different ball game altogether. Yeah, you can dress well to get a date, but after the date has happened and she's decided to be yours, then the relationship is a different ball game.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Facts.
Yeah, stuff like discussing finances, stuff like discussing where you guys go forward. If you guys stay for like 2-3 years together, should you get married? Or should somebody be popping a ring or some shit? How is one person supporting the other? Is the drama in the relationship a good thing or a bad thing? Because in some cases it's a good thing, funny enough. Some cases it's actually a good thing, in others it's a bad one. At what point was this a red flag versus at what point was it something to compromise on? Like, a lot of those things are what I feel like a lot of people fail to understand and learn from whenever they ignore the part about learning from relationships. So at the end of the day, you have somebody who's very malformed in the world of relationships and love and sex and shit, and then they go into it with an older set of people, and then they end up sort of, I don't want to say shortchanging themselves per se, but they end up not experiencing the full breadth of it because somebody left them because they were like, you know what, this person isn't that good of a boyfriend. And it's not that they're bad as a person, they just don't know how to be a better boyfriend. You get? But I do get what it is that you say. Red pill content is actually good for a lot of guys. And I do think for a lot of gals who want to grow themselves in a more masculine way, I think, it's okay. It's not...
I mean, gals get offended, man.
Yeah, a lot of them will get offended, but for those that don't get offended, I think it is particularly interesting. But yeah, that being said, thank you so much for hopping onto the podcast, because
Yes, sir.
we've blown through about a fuck ton of time. It's been a great pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for hopping on, especially with your very interesting schedule. I'm sure you're a very busy guy.
Yeah, man, I am. I'm also one guy trying to build myself up, so
yeah, totally feel you,
my
man.
I function on like a military kind of regimen.
Hi man, thank you so much for hopping on. Mr. Manstyle
Thanks,
YouTube
man.
link to his channel will be available in the description, as well as the link to his Teespring store where you can get the quote-unquote toxic masculinity shirts. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. If you do have any thoughts, comments, or feedback, feel free to hit us up at Breaktime on Westside on IG is the handle, and the DMs are always open. On Facebook, it is also at Breaktime on Westside, and on Twitter, you can slide into my personal DMs, which is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much, and we will catch you guys on the next break.